Hi everyone. So yeah, I think we're gonna get started. For those who aren't here yet, we always post on our YouTube channel so people can watch afterwards. But I'll just kind of introduce myself and also Alaba. So my name is Daniel. I help run Àkójọpọ. Our focus is creating accessible means for musicians in Nigeria. So we just started like the summer guest series, and Alaba is the first person to kick it off. And a little bit Alaba, he is a pre-doctoral student in musicology at Florida State. Originally, he did his music studies at Muson, if I'm correct. Yes, and he also did his undergrad at University of Texas. Where he has also his teaching certificate, and he does a lot of research focusing on the African diaspora. And he's a composer, educator, a music theorist, and researcher. So it's really cool that we could have him today. But I always like to get started with three fun facts about, our guest speaker. So yeah, what are three fun facts about yourself?
Well, thank you, Daniel, for having me. Three fun fact about myself is I love traveling, I love kayaking, and I love sightseeing.
Okay, very, very nice. And then how did you get started in music?
How long do you want the answer? Very short or very long?
You can take your time. I don't this is your yeah, take your time.
Well, how did I get started in music? Um, my very first experience of music was with my dad. Every Sunday evening, he would always listen uh, to these evenings of hymns. He enjoys this, classical hymn singing. My dad is Anglican, by the way. So that was my very first experience, with music. And then when I was 7, I was enrolled in the church choir. So from that point onward, I've been playing, singing, or doing whatnot with music. So that's a very short answer to my musical journey.
All right, all right. And then what led you to deciding that you wanted to apply abroad after your studies at Muson?
It's quite unfortunate that there's no Musan student here, because they'll be able to attest to what I'm about to say. For anyone who has been to Musan, who studied at Musan, uh, well, at the time that I studied at Musan under Mrs. Apata and Mrs. Shoyonwo, um, there's no other place you would rather go than travel overseas. Like
Oh,
if I went to Musan and decide, to go to Unilag, for example, it felt like a downgrade.
mm,
Even though my certificate from Mozon is a diploma, and Unilag would offer me a bachelor degree, it still felt like a downgrade. So if I'll be attending Unilag, I'll just be attending, and I'm not shading anyone who went to Unilag, but it will be a downgrade. I will just be there for the certificate, but in terms of the knowledge and what I really wanted, I will be getting none. So all of that prompted me to apply overseas when I when I was done from Muzan, and also a lot of other factors. In terms of facilities, Muzan. I don't want to say add the best. Muzan is still kind of like the best. Um, so leaving Muzan for me, the only option was to just travel overseas and further build on the foundation that Muzan already gave me, and which is what I've done so far.
okay. And what was that experience like leaving Lagos for school? Or was that your first time leaving? Um,
That was my first time leaving Lagos. um
do you like miss your family or your friends, or were you just out of there? Just
of course I'll miss my family, and I was here for 7 years before I went back home. I just came back from Nigeria last week. uh,
okay.
it took me 7 years to go back, but my experience coming down here, uh it's very, very loaded, because it was all kind of emotions running. On one level, I was going to miss my family. Um, on another layer, I was going to have to adjust to a new culture, to a new environment, to a new educational system. Um, Everything that I've known, I had to relearn all of it, like every single thing, just because of what the US is, and I'm sure this is the same experience for everyone who has been to the US. It's you basically have to relearn everything. So for me, I've learned music. Um, say for example, musical notes, semi-breve, crotchet, minim, and all of that. And I got to the US, it's whole notes, half notes, and all.
Yeah,
So I
I
have to do a lot of relearning, basically.
what's the certificate that Muson does? It's the AB.
ABRSM, yeah.
Yeah, I think that UK, because I've never taken the ABRSM. I never heard about it till I kind of looked up and learned more about music.
Well, in the US, people don't really do ABRSM. I'm not sure it's recognized here, but for
No,
India, ABRSM is a big deal. Like getting
yeah,
a certificate from the Royal School of Music, like it's a big deal.
yeah. I know for me, like I never, yeah. I just when someone says like they're like this grade or this level, I don't know how it relates to like just I'm not I know about it, but I'm not as knowledgeable to know if they say like I'm a grade 8. I don't know what that means. Yeah.
Well, you don't need it really. But what grade eight ABRSM exam entails is you need to be able to analyze um an orchestra score. You need to be able to write complete a two-part no complete a four-part choral, jazz back choral. You need to be able to uh now I'm forgetting all of it. But it has a lot to do with analyzing music, and
Okay.
writing and some composition and all of that
Yeah.
combined.
I'll be interested to like take it someday and see what my grade is.
You don't have to just
Let's see. Okay, so when you were in the US, specifically, do you remember what your first day was like? Like your first day? Did you come when it was snowing, or did you like come when it was nicer out? But like just that first day.
so I arrived on August 6th, I believe, 7th rather. I arrived August 7th, 2014, and I believe I arrived around 5 p.m. that day. So my very first experience, something that stood out to me was it didn't get dark until about 10 p.m. that very summer, and that was very strange.
Okay. Um, okay, so the other question I had was again, I noticed you do music education, composition, theory, and research. If you only had to choose one to continue and forget about the rest, which one would you choose and why?
I've thought about this question, and to be very honest, I wouldn't drop any one of it. Um, and I will explain why. And I'm still going to pick one really, just to answer your question. But for me, all of it informs one another. Being an educator, being a composer, a music theorist, and now doing research, all of that inform one another. For example, my music theory knowledge informs me being a composer, and of course, my music or doing research also informs me being an educator. But if I have to choose one, I'll at this moment, because of what I'm doing, I would most likely choose doing research really.
Okay.
But yeah.
And that kind of leads me into my next question, with your master thesis, the politics of authenticity, recontextualizing identity and syncretism in African. That was a long title, but like, can you talk more about your master thesis and then also where people can access this for?
Yeah. I'll give you a very short answer, and I'll try not to use academic jargons. To explain in very layman terms, what my thesis is about really is looking into all of the ideas that promote African music as wholly rhythmic. So when you hear people talk about African music, they're always talking about the drums, they're always talking about African rhythm and all of this. But there are forces that promoted these ideas, during the 1950s, 1940s, and of course during the pre-colonial era. So all of these ideas were promoted, um, and it's become the norm for people to think that African music is all about the rhythm, is all about the drums. So I was looking into all of these ideas and how it affects African popular music, and how people somehow, to some extent, think that African popular music is not authentic African music. Somehow they don't say it, but they use terms like, "Oh, it's hybrid, it's syncretism," and all of this. So, for example, using Fela, people would say things like, "Oh, Fela was influenced by Miles Davis and by James Brown and by these people and all of that." What that does is it's giving all of the credit to other people, looking over our shoulder to give our credit to people from the diaspora or people from anywhere else in the world. So that's what my thesis is really just about. That when we use terms like hybridity and syncretism, we should be careful to not give the credit to other people. Now, if we focus on Fela himself, um, and I'm sorry, I'm going to use a lot of Fela example. If you focus on Fela, and if you study Fela's life, you have to understand that, yeah, Fela was influenced by Miles Davis, but Fela was first influenced by other people in his environment. So talking about Fela being a radical person, an activist, Fela was influenced by his mother. Fela was only 9 years old when his mom led the women in Abeokuta market women protest in 1947, I believe, if I remember clearly. But people always talk about Fela being influenced um, ideologically by this American woman. So, but what about Fela's mother? Who influenced him at the age of 9? So it's all of these ideas that look over our shoulder to credit other people as though we are perpetual borrowers, I guess, to use that term. So it's basically what my thesis looks into, and also ideas that say Western harmony, as though African people don't have any sense of musical harmony. So it's all of those kind of debunking that I was doing, or that I did in my thesis. But if you're looking for the thesis, it will be published by end of June, and it should be on ProQuest.
Oh, it's still okay. It's still being posted.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, I would like to read this because this is very.
yeah, you should. I put a lot of work into it.
This sounds right up my avenue. So we have a couple questions from the audience. I know some of the people who filled out the RSVP form aren't here, but again, hopefully they'll watch this afterwards. But someone was asking, actually, let me go down from bottom up. Someone was asking, like, how do you see African music in the next 5 years?
How do I see African music?
That's a pretty broad question.
Well. If you look at the last, say, 10 years, uh, there's been a lot of growth when it comes to African music. Of course, African music has always been on the global stage, of course, with the likes of Miriam Makeba, of course, Fela, and all the Keita family, and all these people. African music has always been on the global stage. But now the difference is that Africans are beginning to well represent themselves the way they want to be represented. Take for example Davido, Wizkid. Some of these guys, they now have their own record label. Um, they're able to do what they want to do, with some affiliations to other record label. But the scene is changing. It's different from what it was 10, 20 years ago. So in the next 5 years, how do I see African music? um, I see it moving upward. I see it, gaining more recognition. And I also see African music portraying Africa better in the way that was supposed to be portrayed and the way that we want to be represented. So with the music, it's one medium that our culture is beginning to be well represented. Um, moving us away from these stereotypes of HIV, stereotypes of hunger, stereotypes of people in need. Of course, we're in need, but that's not all there is to African culture. So with all of this, music videos coming out now. We're getting better representation. So in the next 5 years, um, I think we'll be better than we are now.
Right.
So
It's
yeah.
a positive. I know. I know when I talk to my mom, and sometimes she kind of has the opposite. She's like, I don't know. I don't know if things will get better, but it's good that you have a positive mindset about it. Yeah. So someone else had a question asking, what's the most important benefit of music? I think that question, I would want you to answer that question in the context of a Nigerian household. Like if you, because I know for me, my parents did not want me to do music, and they still don't want me to do music. But I wonder, as you being Nigerian, what was the most important benefit for you? I wonder if your parents, supported you going to Muse on it first, and just what that experience was like.
That's actually very, very interesting. I see a lot of people talking about their family not supporting them doing music. The reverse is the case for me. At no time has any of my family member been like, "Oh, why are you doing music?" But I get that from other people. Benefit of studying music, benefit. This is a very broad question. First, I would love to answer this in the context of education. There's this theory that was propounded by Howard Gardner. It's called multiple intelligence. And one of it is musical intelligence. So to be a well-rounded person, to be a well-rounded citizen, uh,
Yeah,
musical intelligence is important. And of course, there are studies that have shown that being a musical literate, or being a music literate rather, informs other aspect of your life, informs other. So, for example, now I've forgotten all of this. I think music deals with the left brain, uh, but that's only one aspect of your brain. That's only one part of it. The other part, the right part, I believe, is deals with logical thinking and all of that. But there's a way that the left brain informs the right brain, and music is one way that people can channel and develop every aspect of their brain. There are studies that have shown this. So education-wise, kids who play music tend to be successful at what they do compared to other people. Um, for the society at large, looking at it from societal context, I would say that music is one way that we get to keep our culture, because African culture is an oral culture, and if that's what our culture is really about, then one way to pass down the culture is to pass it down through music. And our ancestors have done that so well. We have songs from I don't know how many generations, um, and that's just one way we pass down culture. For the Yoruba people, especially, you have songs like um, say for example Batamiadu Kokoka, or you have songs like Ishelogun Ishe and all of that. Um, this music has become one way that will pass down our values, our cultural values. So to the broader society, music is important, especially in the context of African people. It's super important. If we look at it in other aspect of life, say I don't know what else to answer. So you wanted me to look at this in the context of an individual, right? So
I
I
think
think
I think within Nigeria, because I know just from my mom experience, like doing music sometimes, like it kind of like, I think I was talking to Tunde earlier about this. Is like at the end of the day, you want to bring food to the table, and sometimes like within Nigeria, like doing music can sometimes cause a lot of fear. Like, is this what it's going to bring food to the table? So it's like, how do you see a benefit in something like that? Which that's a valid point. That is a valid point.
well, to be very honest, musicians don't make as much as a programmer would make. Um, so that's very fair. But there's more to life than just bringing food to the table. It doesn't mean that musicians are poor people. Um, and this is not to brag. When I was still working in Nigeria, I made more than a lot of bank managers,
Mm.
um, even regional managers. Um, so there's a business aspect to what we do. So now it's left to the individual to harness all of that, to look at the business aspect of it and bring food to the table.
Okay.
But many people just look at musicians as very poor people. um I don't believe I'm poor. I don't believe I'm super rich, but I'm okay. I'm able to provide basic things for myself, and that's if that's all I can do for myself, I think that's enough.
Okay, great, great. The next three questions, I think those are some interesting questions. So they all relate to kind of like this aspect of travel abroad. But Shay was asking, do you think coming back to Nigeria, I'm guessing after study abroad is a thing to do?
Well, I'm not going to answer for everyone. I'm going to answer for myself. Um, okay, wait. Let me rephrase that. Well, broadly speaking, looking at what would be good for Nigeria and music education in Nigeria, I'll probably say that everyone should go back home. Um, but on the other end, we also have to be realistic. A lot of people have gone back home, but what have they really achieved? Going back home. Do other people support you coming back, or do they see you as threat? The Nigerian society, a lot of people like it the way it is, and that's the way they're making their own living. So if you come to change the system and make things work properly, I'm sorry. I have a colleague who lost his life to this. Went back home to try to change the system, but they poisoned him. That's not to scare anyone. That's not to scare anyone. But it's just how our country works. It's better for some people to have it that way. That's how they make their money. But for me though, I think I've decided. 5 years ago, I was still very adamant, like, oh, I'm going back home fully, 100%. But I've decided now that it's going to be like 50-50. I don't want to be a local champion. So I, of course, want to develop my career here in the US by seeking, tenure track
Mm,
positions, um, whatever I get. But my summer would be dedicated to going back, not just to Nigeria, but any country in Africa that I would like to pursue research or be of help to their music education. Um, so that's what my summer is going to be dedicated to. Not now that I'm still graduate student, because traveling is a lot of money.
yeah.
But going back 100% to Nigeria, that is not going to happen for me.
Mm,
No.
yeah. And you bring up I guess that perspective of like, you know, changing the system or like kind of keeping the way. Like it's maybe safer to, not come back fully, which is I haven't thought about it from that perspective. Yeah.
Well, if you plan to go back to Nigeria, anyone would say, of course, you're American, so you can always come back if you don't like it. Um, but there's just a lot of principalities in Nigeria. I'm,
Yeah.
I'm, I'm sorry we're talking about this on recorded video, but it's the reality. It's the reality. Some people don't want it to work. Most of us would want, the system to be better.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. And then the reason why like I started like Àkójọpọ was just kind of like I knew there was something to be done. I just didn't know what. But it seems like as we kind of develop more as an org, we're learning what we can do to be impactful.
Yeah.
But the next question, this is interesting because it's the aspect of like gender. So one person was asking, can a married woman with children get an opportunity to travel abroad to study with children? While someone else was asking, can I as a family man with children successfully further my career in music without leaving them behind. It's interesting because the man was like, I'm going to leave them behind, but then the women said, I'm bringing my children with me. I think that dynamic is interesting.
No. The man said without leaving them behind.
Oh, but I think when he would go, oh, okay. I wasn't sure if he meant leaving them behind and like, okay, I see. You're right. Okay.
So really, the two questions are the same.
Okay, yeah.
One from the male perspective and the other from the female perspective. Um, well, this sounds like an immigration question. Generally speaking, and Tunde can speak to this if you want. As an international student, F1 student to be precise, you get to bring your spouse if you want to. And your spouse and dependent will come on F2 visa. But you have to show proof of funding and that you have sufficient fund to provide for them. So yeah, if you get your F1 visa, your spouse, whether your husband or your wife can of course come to the US with you to study. The only thing you have to look out for is providing proof of support that you can support your family while you're here in the US.
Okay. That's cool. So now I just want to kind of open it up to the audience. So if anyone from the audience has any questions, please, this is your moment. Please don't be a stranger. We are all friends here.
Um, if I could say something quickly, while we're waiting for people to write up their questions, you can just type it in and send it. You can send it to Danielle if you want to be anonymous. So you can unmute yourself and ask your question. Um, but I just wanted to speak to what you're doing, Danielle, with Àkójọpọ. It's very beautiful, and that you really just focusing on Nigeria. And now I'm looking at your mission statement. Bringing more equity and opportunity to composers and instrumentalists in Nigeria by providing educational programming. I think this is something that is absolutely beautiful that you're doing. Um, and I do hope that you get all the support that you will need. Uh, if you ever need any support from me, however little, please don't hesitate to reach out. Uh,
Okay.
the music education in Nigeria needs a lot of restructuring, and of course the whole educational system. But all of these people, they know what to do, but they don't want to do it. Um, so I just hope you get all the help you need, and reach out however little I can help, please.
Okay, yeah, I'll be sure to do that. Yeah. Anyone got?
So
And
I was saying, Damien Lotto, I guess he's trying to raise his hand or something. I don't
oh
know.
yeah, go right ahead.
The floor is open. And my friend is here. She just got a PhD last week. Dr. Jokodola, congratulations. And our research was focused on education in the rural area in Nigeria. So she was in Nigeria doing research earlier this year.
Huh. That is very because actually we just shipped some books to Nigeria as a test run, and like one of the aspects we realized is if you live in Lagos, the city, to get you your materials is much easier. But if you live in the rural parts, because some of the roads, because my dad's from Issa Ekiti and he has a nonprofit where they're trying to improve the roads, but like due to like some of the roads being underdeveloped, it's very hard to get you things sometimes in rural areas. But it is that is so interesting. Oh,
Yeah.
we got one chat. um, again, if no one has any questions, I always like to make it short and sweet. So if people watch it, they're not watching a movie; they're just watching like a TV show length. So, oh, okay, all right. I'm pretty awkward. I'm not gonna lie. So if no one has any questions, um, I think I'm gonna call it a morning, because it's still morning. Oh well, morning or day or night.
Actually, I do have a question.
Come.
So my question is, now that you're going to your doctoral program, are you going to continue the research you've done from your master's, or are you completely changing it up and looking at a different topic within music?
That's a very beautiful question. It's both yes and no. Yes, I'm building on it. And no, because it's an entirely new topic by itself. But I'm building on what I've done really. So in this in one of my chapters, I talked about, or let me say I used Fela as a case study, and what I did was basically I took two of Fela's music and analyzed how um, the musical materials of those compositions are African. Because one of my arguments in the thesis was focused on some of these ideas that say, oh, Western instrument, and say for example the saxophone is of Western origin. So when you use that in African popular band, people want to credit our music because we're using Western instruments to the Western world. So one of my arguments is that musical instrument, whether it's of Western origin or whatever origin, it's just an output. At the end of the day, it's the musicians um, that that make it conform to their local nuances and way of imagining music. So one of my example was how in iLife band, for very broadly, you see ons player using a lot of glissando. I'm sorry, glissando means slide. So for example, Yegbe Woy by E.T. Mensah, da 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 ba ba ba. Now that idea of slurring and sliding is not far from the way that we talk in a focusing on West African dialect, because it's to one extent our tonal inflections is musical, because the tonal inflections this determines the meaning of the word. So, for example, EWA can be anything, can be Ewa, which is beauty, can be Ewa, which is all of you should come, can be Ewa, which is beans. So, our tonal inflections and the way that we speak generally in most West African culture is musical by itself. And that musicality of the way that we speak extends to how most of our musicians play. So, for a saxophone player, in an iLife band or in Fela's band, even though they're using a Western instrument, they're speaking local language. They're speaking local musical, sensibilities. So in one of those chapters, that was my argument that regardless of the instrument that we use, whether it's Western or whatever, the music itself is still very authentic African music. Um, but another argument that I made was, all of the instruments in the Western orchestra, if you have to trace all of the origin, you will trace it back to the Arab world. But no one is going to mention that when you listen to Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. No one talks about the origin of the violin. No. But when it comes to African music, of course, they have to point out that, oh, it's Western origin, it's Western that. All of that is all politics, you know, of claiming stake and ownership of our music. So that's what that chapter is about. So now I'm building further on that to focus broadly on Fela's life and position. And so my dissertation is going to build on that chapter to focus on a lot of Fela's composition and use that to try to find a way of defining African aesthetics, you know, musical aesthetics. How can we use Fela's music, especially when Fela, towards the end of his life, said his music is African classical music? What prompted Fela to position himself as an African icon? And Fela said, and I quote him, that if you listen to Beethoven or G.S. Bach, the music lasts for 35, 40 minutes. And towards the end of Fela's life, Fela started composing one piece for about 40, 45 minutes. And he was comparing his music to Western classical music. And he said, now his music is African classical music. Now, all of these, you know, Western great composers, Beethoven, Bach, Haydn, and all of these people, they've been used to promote Western canon, and they've been positioned as the authority. Now, how can we use Fela in this same regard that we've used Beethoven and all these people to now define what African aesthetics is, especially now that Fela has positioned his music as African classical music? So what is classical about it? What is African about is classic? How can we use that to determine African aesthetics for other composers? Now, for example, Fela's music or Lagbaja's music is not far from Fela's music in terms of instrumentation, in terms of nuances. Even though the music, they're different, but they're not too far apart. So how can we position Fela as an African authority to say that this is what African aesthetics is all about? And, you know, using that to further debunk all of these ideas that, you know, when you use Western instruments, part of your music is Western. No, that's all BS. So yes, yes and no. I hope I was able to explain that. So I'm building on what I've done, but not the entire thesis, but just one chapter of the thesis to building on that for my dissertation. I'm not sure if I answered your question, and I hope I did not use a lot of academic jargons. I try not to do that.
No, very well said. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Oh, okay, I see a question. I see Fela is your musical icon. To what extent has his music influenced your love for music? Well, Fela is one of the people that I love. I love every kind of music. That's strange to say. I love classical music. I play a lot of G.S. Bach. He's one of my favorite composer. But Fela is someone that I'm focusing on at the moment. Doesn't mean that Fela is the only person that, or is the greatest musician that I love. But to what extent has his music influenced my love for music? A whole lot. It's impossible for me to listen to Fela and not start analyzing his music as I listen to it. It's just very impossible. And Fela is a genius. I think Fela, and part of what my thesis is, my dissertation is going to do is, to some extent, I think we need to deify Fela. Not in the sense of worshiping him, but in the sense that Fela is really a genius. Is highly innovative, and no African composer, after 23 years of his demise or our demise, has received as much recognition as Fela's. It's like every year Fela is revived, Fela is rebirthed, and so his music has influenced my love for music generally. There was a time that I was trying to mess with Fela's music and try to trace some of his ideas, musical ideas, and jazz back, and try to merge both of it in a composition, because I love jazz back so much. And I was trying to merge both Fela and jazz back. I haven't started that project, but it's something I'm looking forward to do. So yeah, Fela's music has influenced my musicianship, especially for me. I've studied, so my entire musical study has been Western music. All of my undergraduate, I had to play classical repertoires and all of this. So and we never got the chance to really study African music in our schools back home, because of course it was still very colonized. We'll have to learn Beethoven and all of these dead white men, and would neglect our own people. So for me, listening to Fela and studying Fela has been an opportunity to learn about African music. And Fela's music is, for me, a way to define what is African. Of course, Miriam Makeba too, and all of these other people, but Fela is just one person that stood out to me in terms of trying to find, for me, what can we really define as African? Because these days, everything is becoming blurry. You listen to Wizkid, and Wizkid is sounding like a Jamaican singer. Or you listen to Davido, and he's not so far away from a dancehall musician. But how do we go back and start to trace what is African when it comes to musical nuances? For me, so far, looking at a lot of African musicians, Fela is one person. Of course, we have other people like Haruna Ishola. But Haruna Ishola is more like when you're looking into like Yoruba musical sensibilities. But if you're trying to look at the broader African, musicianship, I think Fela is just that one person. So yeah, his music has influenced my love for music. That's a very long answer, but yeah.
I wish I could like hit a gong, be like, because it was so powerful. I was, okay, I was a really good answer.
But yeah, these are wonderful questions. Thank you.
Oh yeah, it took me like I had to sit in a room, I had to turn off the lights and be thinking about. But these are some also good questions here too.
Yeah.
Let me see. If no one has any more questions, I just kind of want to plug Àkójọpọ. So if you'd like to give us a follow, check out the chat. Our next guest session, we have Titus Underwood. He's the principal of the Nashville Symphony. He's going to be talking about efficiency in the practice room. But thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Unless it would have just been me staring at the screen. So genuinely, thank you so much for being here. Yeah.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Danielle.
Yes.
We'll be in touch. We'll be talking.
Yeah, I sent you an email. So
yeah.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I appreciate it.
Yes. Have a great day, everyone.